How do you bounce back from losing about 5 units? You win 6. Yeah, baby. Woo! Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to the Die Hard MMA podcast. I'm your host, as always, Clint McLean. This week, we're going to be covering UFC Fight Night 148, UFC Nashville, headlined by Steven Wonderboy Thompson and Anthony Showtime Pettis. This is going to be a fun one, everybody, and I'm super excited after our bounce back from last week. If you tailed the podcast, we absolutely killed it. We went 5-1 for plus 6 units. It was an incredible night last week, and man, I'm just so relieved. You know, having that horrific night that we did where we went 1-7. Can you believe we go 1-7 and we only lost 4.95 units? We didn't even lose a full 5 units going 1-7. We go 5-1 and we made back even more than that. That's just the way we roll here on the Die Hard MMA podcast. And oh man, I feel so good getting the monkey off my back. So just a quick recap of UFC London. We had just an amazing night. We had Grundy to kick off the night. He opened up at a plus 200 underdog line, and we were unfortunately only able to grab him at plus 130 for the podcast. I hit him earlier than that, but he was all the way down to plus 130 by the time I was able to pass that pick on to you guys, and he smashed it. He absolutely killed it. Grundy is looking like he's going to be something to keep an eye on going forward. We're not going to get dog money on that kid for a long time. Unfortunately, our boy Ian the Hurricane, that fight got canceled. His opponent pulled out at the very last minute, so that pick got scrubbed off the board, so that's unfortunate. I really think we were going to pin up another W there with Ian. However, Mark Diakiese showed up, and I got to tell you, so many people doubted Mark Diakiese. So many people I saw online were just writing him off after going 0-3. And let me tell you, that kid is something special. He dug deep, and he really has been facing some tough opposition in the UFC. And it just wasn't fair to give him the kind of shake that they did, and for people to doubt him so much. Plus 170. Oh, the disrespect of that line. I can't believe we got that kind of value on a fighter like Mark Diakiese, and he just came through hard for us. That was beautiful. Next up, we ran into the variance train, which let me tell you. So remember last week we talked about variance coming off that 1-7 night. The variance of those kinds of picks where we had a bad decision not go our way with Big Ben Rothwell. This is where variance really broke our way. We benefited from positive variance going our way, especially when you talk about Marshman. The Marshman fight was just, oh man, you could see that fight was, something was off. Marshman did not come out the way I expected him to. Phillips really came out, locked in, ready to go. He was the more confident fighter out there, and he was landing really well. However, he slowed down in the second round, and I really think that's what allowed Marshman to get back in. But I will not pretend that we won that fight. I think Marshman lost. I actually think that we got lucky with some bad decision making there by the judges. Marshman lost that fight, but we got credited with the win for a split decision. So, wipe your brows, pray to the MMA god, sacrifice an extra little bit of goat this week to say thank you for that one. But we got by with Marshman. Silva came out and did what Silva does, and it was another situation where the referee stepped in, and Danny Hot Chocolate Roberts may have gotten a little bit robbed in that situation. However, something that I want to clarify to you guys is that the referee said that the reason he stopped the fight is because Danny Roberts let loose a blood-curdling scream when Silva went for that submission. And according to the referees of the UFC, a scream of that kind is the equivalent of a verbal tap. If you grunt, if you groan, if you're working way through something that hurts, that's one thing. Letting loose a scream is basically a red flag that's throwing up the white flag of surrender to the referees, basically saying that you weren't intelligent enough to say the word tap, but you were in enough pain to scream. So it was a justified stoppage, in my opinion. If that's the law that the referee abides by, then, Silva locked up a submission and Hot Chocolate screamed. So we're going to benefit just a little bit from, some positive variance going our way in that spot. But I really do think that Silva was winning that fight. As long as he made it to the final bell, he had locked up the first 2 rounds. Now, I'm not sure that was going to happen. Hot Chocolate was kind of pouring it on right before that point. And if he had gotten on top, I think he could have busted up and TKO'd Silva in the 3rd round. So we may have gotten lucky again in that spot, but you know what? I'm not complaining. I'll take it. The next fight was Leon Edwards versus Gunnar Nelson, and oh, daddy, did we have an amazing pick on that one again. Edwards came out, and he really showed Nelson what a step up in competition looks like. Edwards won that fight everywhere. He out-wrestled Nelson, he outstruck Nelson, he controlled the distance, he did everything in that fight. Edwards won pillar to post. And I don't know how we got a split decision win out of that. And that's where, like I said, the fights before, we may have gotten lucky with the bad judging because we could have gotten robbed on this fight with the bad judging because one of those judges had a blindfold on out there, had no idea what he was looking at. But we skated by, the right man won. And same thing I got to say actually with the Reyes fight. I want to lay something to bed here. The Volkan Oezdemir versus Dominic Reyes fight, everyone was saying just how robbed Volkan Oezdemir was in that fight, but I gotta tell you, it was a lot closer than people were giving it credit for. Volkan Oezdemir definitely had value at that giant plus 200, plus 230, I think, underdog line that he was sitting at, especially with it going to split decision the way that it did. But I really think this whole fight came down to the second round. Volkan Oezdemir very clearly won the first round. Dominic Reyes very clearly won the third round, and anybody who would dispute either of those two rounds, I'd have to kind of cock an eyebrow at and be like, what were you looking at, dude? The second round is really the one that it came down to, and when something is that close, when a single round decides the entire outcome of the fight, you can't really scream robbery. Because if a judge sees it going one way and the other judge sees it going the other way, that means it was a real close back and forth kind of fight. Again, there was questionable judging at UFC London. I will admit that. I will totally concede to that. But watching the fight live, I had it tied 1-1 going into the third round between Volkan and Reyes really poured it on in the third, in my opinion. Volkan didn't do a whole lot in the third round. I think he coasted. I think he played it safe. He thought he had locked up the first two rounds, which some of the fan base agrees with. I didn't. I thought it was 1-1, and whoever wanted it most in the third was going to take it, and that was Reyes. Unfortunately, our parlay got shattered by Till getting knocked the fuck out. He got absolutely dropped. I apologize for the language, but oh my God. Heads are not supposed to bounce off the canvas like that. If you didn't watch the fights, if you just listened to the podcast, go look it up on YouTube. Oh my goodness. I really thought this thing was going to go to a decision because Till's head is just so dang big. I'm not doubting Jorge Masvidal, but I really thought that his head was too big for him to get knocked out. I thought he'd eat enough shots and he'd skate by on a decision because he was the hometown boy. But wow, did Jorge Masvidal show up and really open some eyes. I underestimated Masvidal. I think some time away from the sport really did him some good. I think he's going to come back and he's going to be a force, because if he's refocused the way that he's looking now, he pulled a Donald Cerrone on me. I'd written him off and putting the guy to bed, but he is reminding me that he is very live right now. Oh, but enough reminiscing, enough of the past, let's move on. We got fights coming up on Saturday, and this card has been burned by the public. Everyone thinks this is just going to be an absolute stinker of a card, but I think there's some hidden value here. There's actually some young up-and-comers that are making a name here. We've got a couple of guys to keep our eye on going forward. This is going to give us a lot of information for some fights that are going to be coming up here. I don't agree. This card is not as bad as people are making it out to be. Just because there's a limited amount of name value on this card doesn't mean that it's going to be a bad night. However, I do need to warn you that we're going to tread very lightly with some of these picks. I can't give out quite as many picks this time. You'll have to keep an eye on my Twitter at DieHardMMAPod, because as always, as the fights get a little bit closer, I see a couple things. You watch the weigh-ins, some new lines and props come out. I'll fire some stuff off of there probably, but as far as the podcast picks goes, we're going to be very careful because there's a lot of questionable and up-and-coming type talent on this card, so we're going to need to be careful. Oh, almost forgot. How could I forget? We got to recap the record. We went 5-1 plus 6 units last week. Our 2019 record is 32-22 for plus 24.87 units. Oh, that feels good. Being over plus 20. Oh, that broke my heart to sink under that line. So we're back. We're in the black. We kick off Saturday's UFC Fight Night 148 with a fight that we are not going to have a bet on, and the reason I want to talk about this fight for just a second is because I grappled with it back and forth on making a pick for the last couple of days. we have UFC newcomer Ryan McDonald facing Chris Gutierrez. Ryan McDonald is 10-0, undefeated and perfect in his mixed martial arts career, whereas Chris Gutierrez is 12-4. He had his first UFC fight on November 30th, 2018 against Ronnie Barcelos, where he lost by submission. So this is two relatively newcomers to the UFC. One guy made the step up and got choked out. The other guy is brand new. So there's lots and lots of questions about both of these guys at this point. Right now, Gutierrez is sitting at about a minus 176, with the other side, McDonald, being about a plus 155 underdog. And when I first looked at this, I really was just ready to give you guys Ryan McDonald. I was like, ooh, plus 155, underdog, 10-0. The other guy stepped up to the UFC and got choked out. This is going to be an easy cash, first dog play, the new kid rolls type of situation. However, then I dug into it a little bit, and I took a closer look at Gutierrez, and he's a lot tougher than you would expect, especially having lost his first fight. He lost it to Ronnie Barcelos by submission, and there's not a whole lot of shame in that. Barcelos is actually a young up-and-coming star himself with only one loss on his record. He's a legitimate UFC talent, and I'm going to keep an eye on him going forward. However, when I started watching the tape on Ryan McDonald, it became very, very aware just how hittable this kid is. And he's got a decent ground game. He's got a couple of submissions on his record, and he's got decent takedowns, but he is so hittable. And at the top level of competition, people are going to find his jaw. Now, no one's been able to put him out so far, but when you get to the UFC, these guys crack like other guys don't crack. So I really expect someone to put McDonald down. Will that be Gutierrez, though? I'm not entirely sure. The problem with Gutierrez is that he's got 4 losses, 1 by submission at UFC level and the other 3 by decisions. He seems to struggle with grapplers. I watched one of his more recent fights, and he ended up on his back the whole time. He had no ability to get the fight back on the feet where he stood a chance. So really, this is kind of a grappler versus striker kind of matchup. And I flopped all the way from giving you guys plus 155 with Ryan McDonald to going, you know what? This is a lock. We need to lay the wood with Gutierrez here because McDonald is just so hittable. I know I've said that a couple times already, but I really was just stunned by the way that people were able to find his head when he was in his fights. And looking at Ryan McDonald's record, he's fought a bunch of trash cans. The last couple of guys that he's beaten, actually, some of them even have losing records in mixed martial arts. Trevor Ward is 6-5. Matt Murphy is 6-10. And then he's got a win over Chad Obermiller, who's 8-9. I mean, his opponents have been god awful. So his 10-0 record is really padded. But then I noticed the takedown discrepancy with Gutierrez. I don't know if he can stop the takedown. And if McDonald can get him on the ground, he could sub him. So I really have no idea which way to go in this fight. It's interesting. I think we're at a crossroads. You know, both these guys are fresh-faced and new in the UFC. I would not be at all surprised if McDonald got a submission in this case. So I apologize in advance if I don't give you that underdog pick at plus 155 for McDonald, but I am just not confident. Chris stepped into the cage, dropped his first UFC fight, and because of that, I think he's really going to try and rebound here with a win. And the way McDonald can get touched on, he very well might just land that shot that puts him down. So long story short, I'm passing on this fight. I apologize, but it was a really back and forth decision for me. So I'm going to stop wasting time on this fight since we don't have a pick, but this is definitely one to keep your eye on. Next up is the first women's fight of the night. There are several of them on this card, so we are in for a fun night. We have got Randa Marcos 8-6-1 versus Angela Hill 8-5-0. Now, those records don't sound spectacular, especially when you look at some of the men's records where we've got 12-4, 13-5, 10-0, stuff like that. You really think that the women's fights seem to be a lot, more questionable based on their records and their experiences. They've got a lot more losses and they're still allowed to compete at the top level of competition in the sport. The reason for that is the pool of women's fighters is still just so much smaller than the men's, especially when you get to the elite level. A lot of these women are going to have the same opponents on their records over and over and over again, and sometimes even 2 or 3 times, because when you get to that top tier with the women's division, there just aren't that many women that are up there at this point. So Randa, the Quiet Storm Marcos, comes in here 8-6-1. She has been alternating wins and losses basically her entire career. She's facing Angela Hill, Angela Overkill Hill, which, by the way, that's just a fantastic nickname. I love that one, who has only been alternating wins and losses since she got into the UFC. Both of these women have run into Nina Ansaroff. Both of these women have run into Courtney Casey. They both lost those respective matches. Angela Hill has fought the likes of Tisha Torres, Jessica Andrade, and Rose Namajunas. Obviously, I'm just listing their losses off at this point, but these are decent names when it comes to women's MMA, and some of them are the top of the division. I actually think Angela Hill has experience with higher level fighters than Randa Markos does, and that's really going to aid her well in this fight. She is the slight betting favorite. She opened up at about a pick'em. I mean, it was pretty close, -130, -110, with Angela Hill being a slight favorite. However, we have one of those fun reverse line movement situations here. I still don't have a warning sign for you. I do apologize. But 54% of the money has come in on Markos. However, Angela Hill is just climbing as a favorite. She's all the way up to -160 over at BetOnline. So given that most of the money has come in on Markos, that says something that the money has gone the other way on Hill. Now, Markos has a more wrestling-heavy game than Angela Hill does, and Angela Hill, I think she's really good at keeping her distance, striking from the outside, but her wrestling game has been improving. She lost a split decision to Courtney Casey in her last fight, whereas Randa Markos got submitted by Courtney Casey in round 1. Granted, that was back in 2016, but when you're looking at common opponents, you want to kind of see how they paired up with each other. Both of them lost by unanimous decision against Nina Ansaroff, so we don't really have a whole lot to go off of in that spot. Unfortunately, there are no prop lines out at this point, but I do not see this fight getting finished. There is almost no way that this fight gets finished. Neither of these girls are a big enough threat on the ground or on the feet to finish the other one. Both of them are very durable. Both of them go to decision very often. In fact, if you look at the props that are out, all they have is Randa Markos versus Angela Hill does or does not go to decision. Going to decision is -475. You'd have to lay almost 5-1 to win a single unit on that pick because it's just that kind of fight. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to go with Angela Overkill Hill, and I'm going to take her by decision. Unfortunately, once again, there is no line out for that, so keep an eye out for my Twitter. I will tweet it out when it drops, but I think we're going to get really close to even money on it. They do give you just a little bit of extra sauce when you take a prop like that, even though that's obviously the way that Angela Hill is going to win this fight. We might be able to get down to more of like even money, maybe -110, -115, as opposed to laying the -155, -160 that we're sitting at now. So we're going to save a couple of cents. Angela Hill, by decision, is the first pick of the night. Lock it up and let's go. The next fight on the card is Alexis Davis, 19-8-0, facing Jennifer Maia, 15-5-1. And this is another interesting spot, simply because Alexis Davis opened up as a massive favorite. She was -230 against Jennifer Maia's bounce back as a 170 underdog, and there has just been a flood of Maia money. Maia's all the way down to +130, +128 at BetOnline at this point. She is just crashing, and I don't understand. Alexis Davis has some really high-level names on her record, and those are the only losses that she has. So dating all the way back to 2012, she's only got 3 losses. Caitlin Chukagian via decision, Sarah McMahon via submission, and then Ronda Rousey by KO, which that was prime Ronda Rousey. You can't really be too upset at her for losing that one. However, she does have not 1 but 2 decision wins over Liz Carmouche, and to me that's a big staple, showing just how tough and durable she is. Liz Carmouche is a little tank in there, and she's probably the strongest woman in the division. So when you've got a girl who can outmaneuver and outstrength and outgrapple Liz Carmouche, she's going to cause people some issues. Now, Jennifer Maia, she's brand new to the UFC. She just stepped in and her debut was against Liz Carmouche, which is what makes this fight so interesting. And she had a unanimous decision loss, which doesn't surprise me. For me, Liz Carmouche is a little money bag. I love betting on her. People are always underestimating my girl Liz, and I just don't get it. She's 13-6. I mean, that's not a great record, but like we talked about with the women's division, again, they run into each other all the time. She only loses to the top tier girls. She lost to prime Ronda Rousey, she lost to prime Miesha Tate, and she's lost to Alexis Davis twice. She's beaten everybody else the UFC has thrown at her since she joined in. So I'm just gonna, by level of competition, give Alexis Davis the leg up here. Now, maybe she shouldn't have been a minus 230 favorite. Maybe she shouldn't be a 2.5 to 1 favorite. But is she the favorite? I think so. I really do think so. And in this case, we're going to go ahead and say thank you to the public. We're going to tip our hat because that line is now bettable. We are going to go ahead and lock up Alexis Davis at minus 148 over at Bet Online. That's the best line that we can get here. We're just going to lay the wood here. And the reason for that is I think Alexis Davis is sneaky good. She has 8 submissions on her record and 2 KO TKO wins. So there is no counting out the fact that she might be able to drag Maia to the ground and choke her out. So I don't want to take her by decision, which is how I usually play my women's fights. We're just going to go ahead and roll with Alexis Davis at minus 148. And I'm going to look for a submission line when this thing comes out because I honestly would not be surprised if Alexis Davis roughed Maia up, kept her on the ground, and grinded on her until she opened up. Maia's brand new to the UFC. Davis has been fighting a who's who of the UFC for a long time. I just think she's got the higher level competition, and she's going to be the tougher and meaner of the two women. When you get one woman that is just that much more physically imposing than the other, the one who's getting grinded on tends to belly up and kind of open up an opportunity. So I really wouldn't be surprised if Davis wins by submission, and I might sprinkle on it there, but we're just going to play it straight for the official pick. Next up, we've got a bantamweight fight between Marlon Chito Vera and Frankie Saenz. Marlon is 12-5-1, with Frankie Saenz being 13-5-0, and I love this fight. This fight fell apart a little while ago and they rebooked it. I'm really glad they did because I think it's a good spot for Vera, really. So Marlon Vera is a young up-and-comer type of guy. He's 26 years old, really getting into his prime. He's starting to put it all together. His last 2 fights, he won by finish. The 2 prior to that, he lost to John Lineker and Douglas Silva de Andrade. Both of those losses coming from really top-tier level fighters in this division by decision, so not a whole lot of shame to be had there. Frankie Saenz on the other end of the cage is getting ever closer to that looming big 4-0. He's 38 years old and he's 13-5. He hasn't been really all that active lately, and what I think is going on here is I really think the UFC is trying to use Frankie as a springboard for a guy like Vera. We can see that they've done that a little bit in the past here with his last couple fights. So if you jump all the way back to 2015, he lost a unanimous decision to Uriah Faber before he retired. He got KO'd by Eddie Wineland. And then after that, he lost a split decision to Augusto Mendez. That was in 2017. So each of those fights happened in a year. 2015, 2016, 2017. December of 2017, he fought Merab Dishulivali. I don't know how to pronounce that. But Merab, he is 8-4, and that was his UFC debut. He lost a split decision to Frankie Saenz, where Frankie was just, a little too savvy for him for his first step up in competition at that point. He was 7-2 at the time that he ran into Frankie Saenz, and I really think the UFC was trying to set Merab up for a good spotlight of an opening debut type of fight. Now, after that fight happened, Frankie Saenz was given Enrique Briones. Now, Enrique Briones was a very similar situation. He got to the UFC, he won his first fight by submission, but then they threw him to Cody Garbrandt for whatever reason, and he lost that one. Then they gave him Douglas Silva de Andrade, he got TKO'd. They gave him Ronnie Yaya, and he got submitted. So after that, they're like, okay, you're on a 3-fight skid. We'll give you one more chance to show that you're UFC caliber. We're going to give you Frankie Saenz. You should be able to beat this old man up if you belong here in the UFC, and he didn't. He lost by 5-round decision to Frankie Saenz. I am not impressed with Frankie Saenz. He's a grinder, he's a little old school in my opinion, and it's just not something that's going to work against the higher level competition. I think the UFC have laid him up as a sacrifice 2 times already, and he has shoved it in their face, and he has made them look foolish, because he has not lost to the guys that he was supposed to. So he went 0-3, rebounded with 2 wins, one of them split, one of them unanimous decision wins, and now they're giving him Marlon Vera. Marlon Vera would wreck the 2 guys that Frankie Saenz won by decision. Marlon Vera is dangerous on the feet, he's dangerous on the ground mostly. He's got 7 submission wins on his record for a 58% finish rate. And the only time he loses is by decision, and he loses to, really respectable names. I do not see him being grinded on by Frankie Saenz here. I think Marlon Vera is going to come back improved. I think he's going to come back dangerous, and I honestly see Marlon Vera finishing this thing inside the distance. I would suspect it's going to be a submission because Frankie Saenz prefers to do his work on the mat, and so does Vera. So I'll bet Vera sweeps and submits him at some point, maybe locks up a rear naked choke. But I wouldn't count out a TKO ground and pound either. Again, unfortunately, there is no prop, and this is another situation where we've been given a gift. We're going to fade the public. Everybody's coming in on Frankie Saenz. 63% of the money is in on Frankie Saenz, moving Marlon Vera from a minus 245 opening favorite down to the minus 150 that we're going to jump on him at. We're getting solid value on the favorite at a much cheaper line than we would have laid if we had dove on it earlier. So let's go ahead, make it official, lock up Marlon Vera, minus 148. Boom. Now that's all the appetite we have for the preliminary card, so let's move right on into the main card, and we are back to the ladies. Undefeated 6-0 Maycee Barber is stepping into the UFC's octagon to face JJ Aldrich, who is 7-2. And this fight is just so fun for me. Maycee Barber is 20 years old. She's undefeated. She's pretty. The UFC is really trying to make something of this girl. This is the kind of cash cow that they're looking for these days. I mean, this is Paige Van Zandt 2.0. She is mean. She's got power. She's athletic. She's going to be something to look forward to in the future. She does only have one Dana White Tuesday Night Contender fight and then one UFC caliber fight against a girl named Hannah Cifers. Now, we saw Hannah Cifers last week, and I was super close to giving Hannah Cifers as an underdog because I think she was a plus 230, and she was facing Polyana Viana. She won that thing by split decision, so it was a nail biter, but she came through as a big underdog and really showed that she belongs in the UFC after having been TKO'd by Maycee Barber in round 2 when they fought back in November. Now, a lot of what I think happened there is that Cifers took that fight on very short notice. It was her opportunity to step into the UFC. She came in unprepared, probably a little out of shape, and she took a beating from Maycee Barber just so that she could get a UFC contract. And that happens sometimes. I'm not making that up. That's a thing that happens. Especially when they need a last-minute replacement or something like that. They'll call up a regional person who maybe wasn't somebody that they were even looking at in the first place and they didn't think was UFC caliber, but they give them a contract, maybe a 2-fight or a 3-fight contract, sometimes only a 1-fight contract. But usually they'll give you 2 just because you're doing them a favor, you're coming in on short notice. They'll let you rebound with a full training camp for your second fight and prove whether or not you belong there. And I really think that's what happened here. So Maycee Barber benefits from the fact that Hannah Cifers didn't have a full training camp, and she's far more athletic than Hannah Cifers is. And I really think this is a spot where they're biting off a little bit more than they can chew. JJ Aldrich has been criminally underrated basically her entire career. She stepped into the UFC against Juliana Lima and lost a decision. However, she rebounded with 3 straight wins. Even though she doesn't look overly athletic, she's surprisingly good on her feet. She's got really solid movement. Her footwork is good. She controls distance very well. And even in the grappling exchanges, she seems like she would be the smaller and weaker fighter, but she really holds her own against bigger, tougher girls. She does well in the clinch. She's able to defend the takedown. And I think she's going to be a real problem here for Maycee Barber. The fact that this girl is a public eye type of figure, they're putting her out there, they want people to see her, she's pretty, she's athletic, she's good, she's undefeated, that's giving a lot of hype to Maycee Barber, and I think that's creating line value for us with JJ Aldrich. JJ Aldrich is a plus 195 underdog, and that is just way too wide. The way that she controls space, the way that she has angles and she steps off to the side, I think she's going to give Maycee Barber real problems on the feet. She's also been training with Raquel Pennington, who's very good on the ground. So I think she's going to be defensively prepared to keep this fight standing. Even if Maycee does try to clinch up with her, she's going to be able to defend those positions and keep the fight on the feet. That's where a lot of Maycee Barber's takedowns come from, is they come from the clinch, they come against the cage. She tries to rough people up and use her physicality and her explosiveness there. And I think that JJ is well prepared for that, and this is going to mostly end up being a striking match, and I really think JJ Aldrich is going to be able to outpoint her. Even if this comes down to a split decision, you don't want to be laying minus 250 with Maycee Barber, or parlaying her and then find yourself praying when it gets to decision time. Let's take JJ Aldrich as a big underdog and look for a score. We can get JJ right now at plus 195 over at 5 dimes. lock it up. Our first big dog of the night. Let's get it. The next fight on the card is another one that I want to mention just because of how interesting it is. We've got Steven Peterson, 17-7, facing Luis Violent Bob Ross Pena, 5-1-0, coming off the Ultimate Fighter. And yes, you heard that right. This guy's nickname is Violent Bob Ross. It may be the best UFC nickname of all time. Also, if you haven't actually seen him, give him a Google. He's actually just perfect for that nickname. He looks just like Bob Ross. He's redhead, frohead. It's amazing. He's awesome, and he likes to paint with blood. So it's a perfect nickname for him. Now, he's coming off the Ultimate Fighter. He's 5-1-0. He got hurt on his season of the Ultimate Fighter, and then really everyone picked him to win that season of the Ultimate Fighter. So afterwards, they matched him up with the winner of that season, and he kind of got trashed. It was a real letdown spot. I think he was a minus 300 favorite in that spot, and he just absolutely laid an egg. He lost by split decision to Michael Trezano, and I know a lot of people who were on Trezano that night, and props to you guys. I should have been on that with you. I felt really, really bad about laying the wood with Pena afterwards, because man, hindsight is 20/20. The way he came out, we expected him to come out on fire, and he just was not there. So that makes this spot very, very interesting. A lot of this is because Luis Pena is just so dang big, and he decided to drop a weight class, so he may be cutting too much weight and sucking himself a little too dry. He's huge for the division, and he's fighting Steven Peterson, who is just... he's not that caliber of an opponent. But after coming off the Ultimate Fighter, you're not really facing high quality opponents in the Ultimate Fighter house either. So we don't know a whole lot about Luis Pena, and he really is not justified at having this minus 280, minus 300 kind of line. The worst part about all this is that I can't even say that we're going to take Peterson because he's a huge underdog at plus 240. Now, the value is clearly on Peterson at plus 240 since Luis is still unproven at the UFC level. I wouldn't blame anybody for taking a shot at plus 240. This is a complete stay away from me. Do not parlay Luis Pena. He could come out here and finish this thing in the first round and I could look like an idiot. He could also come out, win the first round handily, gas out, and then get clipped or TKO'd by Stevenson in round 3, or just lose a underwhelming decision again, because we don't know anything about the guy. I want to give him a fight or two to evolve, keep an eye on him, see how he adjusts to his new weight class, and we'll kind of take it from there. But for now, this is a complete stay away, but watch very closely because it could be highly entertaining. The next fight is a flyweight tilt between Jussier Formiga and Davison Figueiredo. Davison Figueiredo. Davison? Deivieson Figueiredo. I'm not sure. I'm just going to call him Figueiredo because that's easier to say than his first name is. So Jussier Formiga is 22-5-0. Figueiredo is an undefeated 15-0 coming into this fight, and man, this is going to be interesting. So these guys are both fighting for a top slot at 125, and we're still not even sure if 125 exists at this point. This might be a title eliminator fight. This might be a fight that means nothing because both of them will get moved up to 135 afterward. We have no clue. Formiga is one of the top runners in the division. Recently speaking, his only notable losses are to Henry Cejudo and Ray Borg, who are the very tip top of the division. I think Ray is ranked number 5 right now, and Cejudo is obviously the champion. Way back in 2013 and 2012, he lost to Benavidez and Dodson, but both of them were in their primes at that point, and he rebounded with solid wins over Scott Jorgensen, Wilson Hayes, Dustin Ortiz, Ben Nguyen, and Sergio Pettis. That's a freaking impressive run in this weight class. Pettis is no joke these days, and neither is Ben Nguyen. Those guys are monsters. The fact that he lost by split decision to the current champion and then by decision to a guy like Ray Borg, that speaks volumes about this guy's talent. He's completely tested, ironclad in the division, and only the top of the division can beat him. Figueiredo, on the other hand, is 15-0, and while he's got an impressive run in the UFC, he's 4-0, 3 of those coming by stoppage. He's just not proven enough in my opinion. I know he's got a good run, I know he's got a good record, but I think this line is really, really just disrespectful of Formiga's skill set and the record that Formiga has. This fight is a perfect example why you can't just listen to the podcast. You gotta follow me on social media. At Die Hard MMA Pod on Twitter. I've got a Facebook. I'm on Instagram. Give me a follow, because when this line dropped, they opened up Formiga as a plus 150 underdog. That's ridiculous. In no circumstance should he be a plus 150 underdog in this case. I tweeted out that he was going to be one of my plays at plus 150. If you follow me on Twitter, you got on that early line of plus 150, and you can say thank you right now. You're welcome. He's all the way down to plus 120. He's plus 121, plus 122, plus 125 at 5 dimes is the best line that we can get right now. So we beat a 25-cent line move based on me tweeting that play out for you guys if you paid attention. So you're welcome. Usually I use the current lines when I'm doing the podcast, but I'm crediting myself with plus 150 since I gave you guys the heads up on that one way early in this circumstance. So I'm locking up Formiga at plus 150. Everybody's got to take that first loss sometime. If you listen to the Best Fight Picks podcast, which I do, I'm a huge fan of Half the Battle. Go listen to them. Those guys know their shit. They're better than me. But if you listen to Half the Battle, that's one thing they always say. Everybody's got to take that first L sometime. The only person that's proven us wrong to this point has been Khabib. I really think Figueiredo is going to step in here and Formiga is going to show him what the top 3 looks like in the 125-pound weight class. Formiga is going to style on him, welcome him to the top 5 of the division. Figueiredo's got a bright future ahead of him. I just think he's going to be outgunned here, and we've got a nice underdog line on Formiga to go ahead and give ourselves that coin flip if it's close. I do think he wins the fight, so go ahead and take him if you can get the plus 125. I actually think Formiga should be the favorite in this case, so even if he gets bet all the way down to a pick'em or a minus 120, I would still play him because I just flat out think he's going to win. At this point, we're going to jump to the co-main event, a heavyweight scrap between Curtis Blaydes and Justin Willis. This one is fun. Curtis Blaydes is 10-2-0. Justin Willis is 8-1-0, and this is guaranteed fireworks. Curtis Blaydes is a powerful, powerful wrestler, and he's developing a good striking game to go along with it. Justin Willis is an impressive striker, but he's a little too big for my liking. Even for a weight class where guys weigh about 265 pounds, he's just too heavy. I actually think it's a detriment to him, and it will be moving forward because he will gas out moving around the kind of body weight he's got on him. I think he would be a lot better if he could lose a couple pounds and up the cardio a decent bit. He's got 4 KO, TKO wins, and then 4 decisions. 4 of his UFC fights, he's only KO'd one guy. He fought Mark Hunt to a decision in his last fight, but honestly, I draw a line through that one. Mark Hunt was completely checked out in that fight. I really thought that Mark Hunt was going to show up, give the UFC a giant middle finger, and KO one of their rising stars before riding off into the sunset. But the exact opposite happened. He showed up, he was checked out, he wanted nothing to do with that fight, and he got pieced up by Justin Willis. It was only a 3-round fight, so he lost unanimous decision. It's not like he got KO'd or anything like that, but he looked really, really bad. So I don't think that that's a perfect type of measuring stick. I don't think that tells us a whole lot about where he really belongs in the rankings of the UFC's heavyweight division. Blaydes, on the other hand, we know exactly where this guy belongs. Blaydes only has 2 losses on his record, and both of those have come from the future heavyweight greatest of all time, Francis Ngannou. That's right, I'm sticking to my guns. Francis Ngannou is going to be the greatest thing that we have ever seen. You just give it a couple years, come back to this podcast, and I told you so. Now, the first time that they fought, it was back in 2016, Francis Ngannou opened up a cut on Blaydes, and the fight was stopped by the doctor before they could start round 3. So Blaydes always wanted to get that one back. Now, they finally ran it back after Francis had the issues that he did with his career kind of going off the deep end, and he gets TKO'd in round 1. Now, if you just look at the thing saying TKO round 1 on his record, that's going to give you a bad representation of what actually happened. Francis landed some shots on him. He clipped him, he put him down, he hurt him. That was so true. I'm not going to deny that. But Blaydes was not out. Now, if the referee had allowed the fight to continue, maybe Francis clips him one more time and does put him out. But Blaydes showed his chin off in that fight. He took shots. He was very, very controlled. He was defending himself. He was trying to get himself back in the fight and really was ducking and rolling with the shots very, very well. He wasn't unconscious. And the referee stepped in and waved it off. So I hear people talking about the amount of damage that Blaydes has took and how it's going to be something that really starts to weigh on him. You can only take so much after a while before your chin is gone. Man, he's eaten Francis shots better than anybody else has. And in my opinion, he's taken a lot less damage from Francis than anybody else has. He took some glancing shots. He did get clipped in that second fight, but really one shot was all he took, and he shrugged it off and he kept coming. It's not like he was eating a barrage of punches that would have KO'd any other man. He was moving out of the way. He did not get as hurt as people think he did. So a lot of people are riding on Justin Willis to show up and drop a bomb on Blaydes, and I I just don't see that happening. If there is a giant favorite that I like on this card, it is Curtis Blaydes. Right now, you can see Blaydes sitting right around minus 300, minus 280. It looks like you can get him at minus 271 over at Pinnacle, and I like that for a parlay piece. I think Blaydes wins this thing. I think he puts Willis on his back for the first time in his UFC career, and then probably TKOs him with some ground and pound, because once you get a big guy like that down, and you've got a bigger guy like Blaydes on top of you, you're not getting back up. The other thing Blaydes has going for him in this case is his gas tank. Like I said before, I think Justin Willis would really benefit from having some more gas in his tank, because when this fight gets to round 2 or round 3, Blaydes is going to keep pouring it on, and Willis might slow down, and that will be his end. I've got Curtis Blaydes here in this fight, and unfortunately, I don't lay big lines like this. You guys know me. I look for value. I don't see a whole lot of value here. I will never lay minus 250, minus 300 on a fighter. Sometimes, don't get me wrong, there can be value at that number, like when you've got a John Jones or something. But honestly, if you're that confident in a fighter, I think you bring that price down by parlaying them up with somebody else to make that line something reasonable, maybe even money. I was actually planning on giving you a parlay with Blaydes in it, but the fight that we were going to parlay with got scrapped from the card, so we're kind of out of luck on that one. Honestly, I'd say pick your favorite on the card and then parlay them together with Blaydes to bring that line down. So if you like somebody like maybe, Vera, or if you're going to take a shot on Gutierrez, he's all the way up to minus 185, you can get even money or maybe plus 110, plus 120 if you piece those two together. If you disagree with me on JJ Aldrich giving Macy Barber a run for her money, a parlay between Barber and Blaydes I think would be money as well, except that I disagree and I think Barber's going to lose. But that wouldn't be a bad strategy if that's the kind of pick that you want to make. Take Blaydes, pair him up with your other big favorite on the card, but whatever you do, don't parlay him with the main event, and I'll tell you why. Stephen Wonderboy Thompson is coming up against Anthony Showtime Pettis, and this fight is bonkers. Stephen Wonderboy Thompson is a natural 170-pound fighter. He fought Tyron Woodley not that long ago, and then he lost to the current hype train, or I guess derailed hype train that is Darren Till. Now, the whole thing with Wonderboy is that everyone's been having a real hard time with his style. He's a karate specialist and a point fighter with some serious knockout power. He'll explode and close the distance on you really fast, and he catches guys off guard with that. That's how he KO'd Johnny Hendricks and Ellen Berger way back when he first stepped onto the UFC scene. He also knocked out current champion Robert Whittaker at 185 pounds, so that's saying something. The kind of power that this guy possesses is something else. Now, the thing is, I actually think he's becoming kind of predictable. We don't see a whole lot of evolution in his game. He had those two close tight fights with Tyron Woodley where he had a draw and then a majority decision loss in the second fight that was highly contested by a lot of the fan base. He did win a decision over Jorge Masvidal, then he lost a close decision to Darren Till. I really think fighters are starting to figure him out. We've got enough tape on him at this point, people to really game plan for the kinds of things that he does. Now, Anthony Showtime Pettis is the former 155-pound champion, and he's had a real tough go of it lately. This fight is very interesting for him because he went on a 3-fight losing streak back at 155 pounds in 2015. He did go down to 140 pounds. He submitted Charles Oliveira, which that's saying something. That guy has a sick, wicked ground game. Then he lost to Max Holloway, who's coming up to 155 pounds and is one of the best fighters that we have ever seen. He rebounded back at 155 facing Jim Miller. He lost to Dustin Poirier, who's another one of the greats and potentially the future champion of 155 pounds. He submitted Michael Chiesa, who himself is moving up to 170 pounds and is another big, strong, explosive, wicked ground game type of guy. And then he lost via TKO to Tony Ferguson. Now that fight was fun. It was bloody. Anthony looked better than he has in years in that fight, and he almost took Tony out before Tony flipped the tables on him. What I'm seeing from Anthony Pettis is a late career resurgence. I actually think he's starting to look better in these last couple of fights. Even though he's got some losses, he's losing to some of the best guys in the world in the most stacked division that you could ever ask for. His last 3 losses are Tony Ferguson, Dustin Poirier, and Max Holloway. Current champion, and guy that's fighting for the belt. Now, his performance against Max Holloway wasn't anything to write home about, but I do also think that the cut was really affecting him. He barely made the cut for the Charles Oliveira fight, the one before that at 145, and then he didn't make weight for the fight against Max Holloway where Max won the belt. And you could tell that he just was not himself. He didn't have that usual pop to his punches. He ran out of gas super quick. That was a bad look for him. He could not cut it down at 145. The way I think this fight matches up is Anthony Pettis is going to be bigger and stronger and have a better gas tank at 170. If you look on his Instagram, if you look on his Twitter, he's putting pictures of himself out there, and man, he looks good. So there's a picture that he tweeted training with Ben Askren and Tyron Woodley, who are both very big, solid 170-pound fighters. He's taller than the champion, or former champion, I guess, Tyron Woodley. Man, it's going to take me a long time to get used to that. I'm so used to Woodley just being the champ at 170. I'm going to have to really work hard to try to correct that because, man, I'm such a fan of that guy. I'm bummed he lost that fight. Anyway, Pettis looks big is the bottom line for this. So that height advantage, that reach advantage, that weight advantage that you would expect Thompson to have over a 155-pound fighter doesn't look like it's there. Anthony Pettis is going to be the faster of the two. I don't think he's going to have the disadvantages that a lot of people assume that he will, and I actually think that his power is going to translate back up to 170 just because of the sheer explosiveness of the strikes that he throws. I think both of these guys took this fight because they know neither of the other guy wants to get down to the ground. However, if it does hit the ground, Pettis has got the better credentials. Pettis is going to be the one who's got the explosive submissions off of his back. He's shown us time and time again that he can throw up triangles and arm bars. He knows how to escape. He knows how to get back to his feet. Thompson is not a wrestler, and I think that's why he took this fight. He wanted a rebound against somebody who wasn't one of these top tier wrestlers. He lost those two fights to Tyron Woodley, he had the draw and he lost to Tyron Woodley. He rebounded with a unanimous decision win over Jorge Masvidal that was not the same ultra motivated Jorge Masvidal that we saw last weekend. He also dropped that decision to Darren Till, who we are now seeing as being exposed as maybe not as great of a fighter that we might have thought he was. Who does that leave in the division for Wonder Boy to fight? He's got to face Colby Covington. He's got to face Kamaru Usman. He's got to face a guy like Leon Edwards. All of these guys are really, really solid on the ground, and that's obviously Stephen Thompson's weakness. If we're figuring out the kind of strikes and attacks that he's throwing, it makes it easy for us to take him to the ground, especially with the credentials that those guys bring. He doesn't want any of them. He wants to stay relevant. He wants to make some money. He wants to get his name back out there, but he needs a winnable fight. So he thinks, oh, Pettis is willing to step up and fight me. I'm bigger than this guy. I can outstrike this guy, and I know he's not going to take me down. Pettis is looking to do the same exact thing. He's struggled with wrestlers as well up until recently when he started subbing guys like Michael Chiesa, but he's looking for a payday and a war on the feet. Both of these guys are ready to throw down. I think Pettis is going to be able to cut better angles. I think Thompson is going to have a hard time hitting a slick, smooth fighter like Pettis, and I think Pettis is going to throw the kitchen sink at him. I honestly would not be surprised if Pettis won this thing via head kick TKO. I really wouldn't. The creativity that Pettis is showing in his strikes and the willingness to engage that he showed me against Tony Ferguson, just really, it's a throwback to what got Pettis to the title at 155 pounds in the first place. I think he's going to give Thompson fits. And even if Thompson does win this fight, I don't know that he's going to be able to finish a guy like Pettis. It might be a decision. And if we're going to go 5 rounds and you're going to give me a fresh Anthony Pettis that's got some extra gas in the tank and some extra juice on his shots, you're telling me that you're going to give me plus 365 on that guy all day. We can get plus 370 over at Heritage. I don't know what these people are doing. People are piling money on Stephen Wonderboy Thompson, and I think this fight is so much closer than this line indicates. I don't understand how the line is this wide. Thompson is not that guy. Thompson is not Anderson Silva. Thompson is not head and shoulders above Anthony Pettis. This fight is going to be competitive. It's going to be scrappy, and all the value is on Anthony Pettis. I'm going to be going hard on Anthony Pettis at plus 375. So to recap, we are going to take Angela Hill by decision whenever that line drops. Alexis Davis minus 148. Marlon Chito Vera at minus 148. Look for him inside the distance as well. We've got JJ Aldrich at plus 195. Hussier Formiga at plus 150. I like Curtis Blades as a parlay piece. We're not going to give him official because I lost my parlay piece, but you can throw him in with the other favorite on the card that you like, and Anthony Showtime Pettis at plus 375. We're looking for another big week. We're looking to continue the roll here. Give me a like, share, subscribe, turn on your notifications, follow me on YouTube, tweet at me. You got questions? I'll answer them. Hit me up. You guys know I like to have a little bit of back and forth. Thank you, as always, for the support. I love you all so much, and let's roll.